Hey, everybody. Cool. Well, welcome to today's webinar. We're so glad you made it. We are hosting a webinar today. If you didn't know, the content is what is new in Microsoft Teams and a review of some of the latest features coming to the platform. My name is Ryan Emmerich. I serve as Director of Client Experience here for our team. Day to day, that looks like working with our managed IT services clients in doing strategic planning, budgeting, sales, and kind of account management functions to make sure technology is serving you guys well as a business. My co-presenter here is Adam Atwell. Hopefully he's a familiar face to many of you at this point. He's our Chief Technology Officer and also Microsoft MVP. Kite Tech is a managed service IT provider. We also do kind of consulting, technology consulting, and some agency-specific consulting services, serving small and mid-sized businesses across the country at this point. We really do have accounts in every time zone. I can attest to that. We specialize in working with independent insurance agencies, but we also have a mixture of other types of nonprofit and legal and some other entities that we get to serve as well. And we really want to help those organizations strive to maximize their use of technology and improve their business performance using some of these awesome tools. So I'll go ahead with that being said, hand it over to Adam here so he can kind of introduce himself and get us kicked off today. Adam?
Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. Happy that you all are here to join us on this adventure of updates for, what's going on with Teams and what's changed and what's coming a little bit. Happy to be with you. As Ryan said, I do a lot of Microsoft things. I'm our CTO here, and I love helping people think about what their cloud journey looks like as it relates to the adoption in their Microsoft journey. And so we're going to talk about that today with one of my favorite topics, collaboration and people. You can see here on the screen, this is the agenda. If you signed up and read our webinar landing page, you know kind of what we've talked about. One thing I want to let you guys know transparently is our marketing team did give me some very strict guidelines today. I'm not allowed to give out any gift cards for people turning on their cameras, so you won't be asked to turn on your camera. They did tell me that we had to have a really good time and they needed fun Adam, not boring, grumpy Adam. So if you don't see fun Adam come out and informational Adam, please just throw me some emojis. I'll probably smile. And then in full transparency, I just got to say there's a lot of anticipation about this because we think we put together some pretty good stuff that's relevant. So I'll dive right in. For any of you that have been using Teams for a while, you've probably noticed a lot of changes. And one of the things for me that has been a huge frustration is how and where to find chat. I've talked about the chat experience that came out of box with Teams during several of our webinars. And most times it's helping people understand how to be less confused when chatting with others. Microsoft announced and started a private preview of the new chat and channels experience. And that's really a large part of what we're going to talk about today. And so let's kind of dive into that. If you see here, we grabbed a couple of pictures of what the current Teams experience is for you. And that's for all of you that haven't opted into the new experience yet. But you can see on the left, we have what is your typical chat app. On the left-hand side, those icons, activity, chat, Teams, calendar, calls, etc. Those are referred to as the app bar. And so most of you have the stock apps. Some of you may have pinned others there, but you can see chat and highlighted. And those are the things that you're used to seeing. The chats you have that are one-on-one, some favorites maybe, and app mentions. On the right-hand side, you'll see here something called Teams. Teams. And you'll see if you're a member of any kind of Teams team, you'll see the channels listed and they're in two separate views. Now, oftentimes people would get confused about managing chat between those two locations. So Microsoft came up with this really great idea to go and combine them. And so the new Teams experience is taking what we just currently know as chat and Teams and combining them into one streamlined view. You can see here, this is a picture of that view. I'm going to highlight a few specific pieces here. And I hope this laser pointer's not terrible on your eyes, but you can see this. Actually, that's a drawing tool. I'm sorry about that. But that's the chat there, and that's where we land. You can see you have the favorites area over here. In addition to that, you have this category or grouping called second favorites, which I've created. And then down below, you can see what we used to know as what was under the teams button, right? And so they've consolidated that into one app on the app sidebar, and you can customize that view in a lot of different ways. So let's take a look at some of those ways. You can see the filter pills up top as they're referred to. On the far right-hand side, you can kind of see them in all of the options you have: unread, channels, chats, unmuted, because I mute a lot of chats, and meeting chats. But you can see when you select any of the filter pills, it just narrows your view quick and easy. So if you know, hey, I just want to see unread things because that's the way I work, which is a lot of times how I work. I'll say, hey, I only want to see unreads. And so I work that way, and I'll just look at that view, work that list, or work that stuff that's bold and screaming at you. Another way is folks that live out of channels, right? Or maybe, the channels list is so large, or your chats list is so large that you want to consolidate that view or change it up in some way. And so you can see here, you have a lot of options in ways that you can customize these things. A few things that I do want to point out, similar to other areas of Microsoft apps, you'll find things hiding under both down pointing carrots, if you will, as well, or drop downs, as well as triple dots. And so in the last slide, I'll go back to it briefly here. You can see that I had something called second favorites. The second favorites is just another section. So that could be a different department. Maybe you don't have any teams today, or you're not really taking and utilizing the teams and channels experience in the way that it's built. Maybe you could have a few different favorites of one-on-one chats or combinations of people. So that's a little bit about how you can filter it. The last thing that I wanted to point out was the meeting chat. The meeting chat is a huge, huge, awesome ad from a filter perspective. How many times do you have to go back to your calendar and you're like, oh my gosh, where was that chat from that meeting? And I don't know, show of hands, anybody reactions? Has anybody had that frustration where you're like, I just need to get back to that meeting chat, right? And so this is a real value add for the way that we work. And then it really kind of speaks to however it makes sense to you. In addition to turning on those filters, creating different categories that you can see, you can also reorder the way they stack. Favorites at the top, teams and channels down below, chats a little bit, at the top. You can move them around if you're seeing them all. Microsoft in their promo video advertised a few things that aren't fully in production. They snuck out in marketing. But like full drag and drop and sorting, that's not completely there. But once it comes full production, you guys will see that be a lot more intuitive. One thing that happens all the time for folks when they go and turn on a new feature is they get to a place where they're like, well, how do I get back? My brain doesn't work this way yet. So can I go back in time? And I just wanted to point out, once you have the new chats and channels experience released to your Microsoft tenant and you're opted into it, your settings area in Teams will change to see what you have here on the screen. And you can see specifically the chats and channels area. You can choose between combined, which is synonymous with the new experience, or separate, which is the old experience. And so that's always good to know. This kind of I want to go back feature was a choice we had for a little while as we were making the transition between Teams Classic and the new Teams, right, that launched last year. Couple of facts everybody always asks: when can I have it? When can I have it? When can I have it? So public preview started November of 2024. The general availability is estimated to arrive mid 2025. And what that means, really, public preview is a feature that you can opt into ahead of time. Typically, as a standard, we don't opt our customers into public previews because it creates unintended consequences. So we don't typically recommend that for production, though I will say we do public preview because we're tech people and we can deal with little bugs like that. General availability is estimated to mid 2025. Keep in mind, all these things are rolling. But really, I think you're going to start seeing this option for getting started that you have on the screen, and then you can opt in. You will see the same option in web and the desktop clients across platforms. So that is the new chats and channels experience. Is anyone else excited? Yay. Awesome. I could tell you I've been using it for roughly 2 or 3 months now. I can't remember because the old experience, I forgot half of the things that frustrated me. But as I put this webinar together, I remembered more and more how much of a value add this is going to be for all of the folks that use Teams every day. So there we go. All right, let's talk about new features in Teams meetings. So just a comment or two. A lot of folks don't really get excited about meetings these days, right? Raise your hand or react if you're like in meeting fatigue. I am. I run through meetings all day long. Meetings are definitely a stressor. You know, you're standing or sitting in the same spot all day. And really, there have been little things that have been added to Teams meetings along the way that really kind of do some quality of life things. And so we're going to go into those things. The first one is not new, it's new-ish, newer. But does anybody remember when you would go into a meeting and you would record that meeting, but it wasn't yours because you're like helping somebody run the meeting, and you would be the guy who always says, all right, I'll start the recording because auto recording doesn't start by default. And then because you started the recording, even though it was your colleague's meeting, the recording would end up in your OneDrive. Does anyone remember that pain? And then after that went in your OneDrive, the participants in the meeting would not automatically have access to it. So they'd have to nag you and say, hey, Adam, I need access to that recording that you started, which wasn't even your meeting. So this kind of seems like an afterthought from a development perspective. Why wouldn't I want to have control of the recording? Why wouldn't I want it in my OneDrive if I was the one who organized it? But this took a long time to come into full production. And so now when you record a meeting or someone initiates a recording, even if it's not their meeting, it will go to the organizer's OneDrive. And then, of course, all participants that are internal members of the staff for the company will get view permission by default. You can go in and change it from view to view and download if you wish. If you invite anyone, from an external outside your company, external or guest, they do not get this by default. You still have to share with them. And that's an intentional thing that if it were opened up, it would kind of lead to some security no-nos, if you will. So not to worry there, but that is a meeting recording update. I'll also call out one other thing regarding meeting recordings. So for any meeting recordings that are created inside of Teams, right, inside of your various teams, unless it is a live recording in a channel, an on-demand channel recording, it will still go in the organizer's OneDrive. So let's say you own a team, you're the owner of that team, and you schedule an event on behalf of that team, that will go to your OneDrive, not the recordings folder inside of the team's SharePoint storage. And so, however, if you do a live meeting in the channel, hit meet now, and then record it, it will land always in that said channel's recording. It's a subtlety, but it's a bonus piece of information. I hope it's helpful. So that's meeting recording updates. Polls app. Okay, I can tell you all we're going to talk about the webinar and interactivity, kind of that whole user connectivity piece of the Teams engagement a bit here today. You'll see themes in there of, how to really engage your users. And I can tell you guys, some of the other folks here that are panelists and help put this webinar together from our marketing team, we went and we were trying to run polls way back inside of Teams, both for meetings and for Teams webinars, and they were just a hot mess. Literally, you see it on the screen, it was a hot mess. This has been streamlined, and so you have a consistent experience of polls across each of the experiences you're on. Now, some people who are on Zoom don't care. We're on Zoom. I'll tell you more about that later. But realistically, you want polls to be easy, you want them to be fast, you want them to be simple, and you want to capture engagement from the folks that are in the meeting. And so, again, some people are like, I don't care, I don't do this, or I use Zoom. But I got to tell you, if you looked at polls in your meetings, this is the time to look back for both internal meetings, and these same functions do follow to the webinar functionality. So you can see there on the screen, we have some instant polls that you can just quickly launch. Yes, no, up, down, love. I don't like to use the word hate, but heartbroken. So those are, just zeros and ones, if you will, simple polls. Or then you can go and have multiple choice, and they give you some suggested polls right in line. And so these are canned. I did update the how am I feeling today hot mess, of course, for fun. But let's go to the next screen, and we'll see here. This is kind of the attendee view. So you have Alex up there. That's the little picture, and he got the poll on his screen. He just clicks it, he submits it, he captures it. Over on the right, you can see the live poll during the actual meeting experience being captured, as well as what the options are. Do I want to close it? Do I want to see some more details? Do I want to export it? Or did I mess it up and I want to can it and delete it? Lastly, you can see the other pieces of kinds of polls, right? There are 5 defaults in addition to the 3 instant polls that we just covered. Multiple choice you saw on the last screen. Everybody knows what a quiz is. Word cloud, if you haven't seen it, is pretty fun. And then ratings and rankings. So those are very useful ways to engage in your meetings, because I can tell you, if you're not using ways to capture engagement, your audience is being lost, right? So I just typically prompt people and say, please give me an emoji. And you guys are doing a great job of responding. So thanks for that. So that's the polls app from that one side. In addition, a lot of folks would say, well, hey, what happens after the meeting's done? How do I get back to those polls? And you can see that those polls live on the polls tab on the meeting itself. And we can see the responses here. Now, the polls don't auto close, which is kind of funny. I think that's a design issue that Microsoft could probably clean up a little bit. Once the meeting ends, why would you keep a poll open, right? That seems silly. There may be a setting somewhere in the back end that I just haven't found yet. But you can see on the screen here, this is what the closed polls look like. And then, how they're captured, and they're very easy to get to and see. And again, these are available for meeting participants in the organization. They can get back to them as well. External organization participants, guests, etc., they don't get all these things. They're limited to internal. We're going to move now to the Q&A app. So the Q&A app used to be exclusive to the webinar functionality, but they brought it down to the meeting experience. And so you can see inside of the meeting options, when you go to either build the meeting the first time, or during the meeting while it's running, you can go to the engagement tab and you can toggle the Q&A off or on. Now, if anyone's ever used webinar functionality in Teams, you know that, well, hey, certain things I can't change live, right? And so to be able to turn on and off Q&A during a meeting is great, because maybe you don't want to have questions during your whole meeting, right? Maybe you only want them at the end, or at the beginning, or a select portion of it. And so those are things that you have full control of as you go through the meeting. One other thing that I just had to know was, if you turn off Q&A accidentally and you've already had a bunch of questions, what happens? And all that Q&A is saved. It doesn't get deleted. It lives in the meeting. And so that's pretty great. Keep going, and you can see a little bit of the experience here. I just kind of cut out the Q&A panel from both perspectives, an attendee and a meeting organizer. And so the first screen there, you can see as a participant, you can go and ask questions, right? And this is the same kind of chat experience we expect at this point. We expect it to be easy. We expect the UI to be streamlined. We want it to look nice and feel nice. Threaded messages, emojis, quick responses, those kinds of things. And then for the meeting participant, you can see, hey, I can see all, or I can see my questions, right? In addition to that, you can start a discussion. So discussion versus a question. Discussion allows a threaded conversation. And so that really allows or expects more interactivity. So that exists, questions and discussions. And then in addition to that, the meeting organizer can filter based on the things you would want to see. All the conversations, things I haven't responded to yet, things I've already archived or deleted, whatever it is. And then if you go and you check under the triple dots here, you can see at the message level what the meeting organizer or moderator has. In addition to editing it, archiving it, deleting it, closing it, you can also pin it. And so if it's a really good question, it brings it to the top for the rest of the audience to see. Pretty exciting stuff for anybody who runs a meeting and really wants to use this. This experience is also streamlined now and has feature parity across mobile and web and full desktop clients. On the mobile side, like anything, because it's a smaller screen, it's true both for the polls and the Q&A app. It does look and feel a little bit different, but you get the same core functionality there as well. Awesome. New calendar experience. Now, I don't know if I'm the only one here, but when I saw them turn on an option for the new calendar experience, I was like, I need to try this now. And so I got it as a preview feature a few months ago, and you see it there from the calendar app inside of Teams, right? When I first turned it on, it actually didn't work at all. And I had to go fetch it and do all these technical things that make it way too complicated for people to invest in. But first step is to turn it on, right? You should see it. It's starting to come down. I can't remember the exact release cadence, but they're doing a controlled release on it. So you'll start to see that button when you turn it on, and you'll see now something that looks very, very familiar. You can see a calendar that mimics or follows what you see in Outlook, both on your phone as well as on your desktop and the web. Microsoft has worked really hard to try to streamline and have continuity in what shared resources from a calendar perspective come through as you're going through each of the different Microsoft experiences. And so here you can see we have people's calendars in addition to our own calendars. So that's someone you may have shared access to. In addition to that, you also have groups. And so these are all the different groups I'm a part of, or Alex is in this case. And then you can easily turn them off and on. So you could change that view. And most of you have used Outlook. In addition to that, you can have a today view or a week view. I don't have all the views here for you today. I just wanted to highlight these. But lastly, you can also see when you go to create a new event that you'll see the options on what calendar to put it on. So maybe you went and you accidentally clicked the wrong thing, or you didn't have it selected for the calendar you intended to. You can do all of that in line and make those changes. So that's pretty great. A lot of quality of life there inside of the calendar experience and feature parity. I would recommend you check that out as soon as possible. Awesome. I needed a water break. All right. So one of the things that I like to point out is this attendance report. And just as the meetings experience has changed over time in Teams, it's gotten a little bit better. This used to look really clunky. You can see there this is a standard feature that you're looking at right now. It's just when people come in the meeting, when they leave, how long they're in the meeting, what their role is. And so this is just really useful information at a glance. Was Bob in the meeting? Was Alex in the meeting? No, he never made it. Okay, great. So that's great. You can download that information. It just puts it in a CSV file. If for some reason you have a recurring meeting, let's say you have a meeting that happens once every Monday at 9 a.m., you see the drop down box in the upper left hand corner where it says Jan 29. You can just click that drop down and you'll grab the attendance report from that other recurrence of the meeting. Lastly, you get kind of baited, maybe isn't the right word, but you get tricked a little bit down there at those little engagement things. Everybody loves emojis. Give me some emojis if you love emojis. I don't know how to speak emoji, guys. I struggle with my wife. And I'm like, what does that emoji mean? Even though I'm a tech guy. Yeah, thank you for all the emojis. Love the engagement. But when I went to retest this feature, because we have a lot of the premium add-ons, I was like, oh, this is great that it's on the engagement report. Well, of course, the engagement report itself is actually tied to a premium feature. And so if you click on one of either the engagement toggle or any of those little icons down there, then it tells you, oh, you discovered a premium feature. Guess what? You can give me more money by clicking this button and you'll forget that you have a subscription. That's just a subscription joke. But there it is. So we found something. If we care about engagement in meetings, we're going to hold that back and call it a premium feature. And so that transitions us perfectly to some Teams premium feature updates or highlights. So this is the area of the webinar where I get to ask or answer the question, why are we in a Zoom meeting if Teams Premium can do all of these webinar things? And so we're going to dive into this a little bit more, and I promise you I'm going to get to that. I'm just kind of teasing it a little bit. First things first, Teams Premium has a lot of different features. You can see the headings of what those features are. This is a screenshot straight from Microsoft's Learn resource that can go into all of these things in more detail. Most people started with Teams Premium because they really wanted the intelligent meeting recap. Others have tried it on webinars and events. We did ourselves. We said, hey, let's go and give this a try. And it had some experiences that needed some polish, right? In addition to that, it didn't have all the integration capabilities that some of our existing tools did, like Zoom. Like, for instance, at the end of the meeting, if we want to put a little survey up on the screen for you, we can't do that with Teams webinars yet unless they released it and I missed it. Other things like integrating to a CRM and capturing that data, right? An open API. And so, intelligent meeting recap again is typically why folks started to look at Teams Premium. Webinars and events was the second. Inside of the enterprise, there's a lot more things that are more relevant. Custom meeting branding is one of them. Town halls, advanced collaboration tools, and some of these other things that you'll see, watermarking to your meetings. And so really for the SMB, which is who we serve primarily, they really don't take advantage of some of these more advanced features. Now they've started to build out some other things that maybe might be considered more valuable for folks. QZap is one thing, and that's specific to the Teams telephone experience where you call someone. The Meet app, we're going to cover in a second, and then integrate immersive mesh experiences. Sorry. And that's the whole 3D virtual reality thing that a lot of folks really are all about. So let's say, what is the intelligent recap with Teams Premium? Well, if you already have Copilot, you might say, well, this looks kind of familiar. We're gonna tell you what's different here in a minute, but you can find the recap tab over at the top, similar to where the polls or the chat is. On the meeting itself, you can see here speaking parts, right? Who was speaking at what point. You can also toggle over to topics, and if you're talking around one specific thing, you can easily get to that. And then, of course, you have your AI generated notes and tasks. And if you did app mentions like called out someone, hey, Beth, can you take this as a to-do? Those kinds of things, the AI will start to do some of those things for you. And so that's really where it started. This was one of the first, real AI-based features, I would say, in modern Microsoft 365. And this feature predates Copilot. And so this is really something that we've been using for a long time internally before Copilot was even a thing, and we get a lot of value out of this. And so that's what the intelligent recap looks like. If you come over here, we're just going to highlight a few of the things just for, dramatic effect, if you will. You can see this is one piece of the Teams premium experience called the Teams premium webinar experience. And you can see there's a huge amount of features here that are different, right? And so I was referring to, we're in a Zoom webinar. We're talking about Microsoft. We're even talking about Microsoft Teams. I'm a Microsoft MVP. We're not a Zoom partner. What are we doing in a Zoom webinar? Well, it's like all things, third-party apps you may have, a legacy line of business app you need to keep. Sometimes all your needs aren't met in product. And so we're here today in Zoom because there are a few things that aren't on this list, and it doesn't integrate fully to how we do our marketing and engagement with folks like you. And so we've seen it grow a lot, and we're going to continue to keep our eye on it. And we think that for folks that are running webinars, there's a lot of opportunity here. And some folks, it has what you need baked in, even in the base Teams webinar. But you can see some of these other features, right? That you have the wait list, custom reminder emails. You can see those engagement reports for those webinars themselves. And then there's some other techie kinds of things that you get down the road. Q's app, this is one for me. So I end up with a lot of token this guy. I was the token Apple guy when I walked in over here at Kite Tech. And I was one of the first, I think I was the first person to really push Teams voice or Teams phone on our customers. And really for the time when we first put our first customer on Teams phone, it really, from a basic sense, was really pretty good, right? It was somewhere where you could dial in and out easily, you could handle some things, but we could tell pretty early on that it lacked a lot of specifics that our customers needed. Real-time metrics, right? How many calls are waiting to be picked up? Availability, or kind of like a receptionist console, if you will. In addition to that, historical reporting on calls. And then more than that, those things of reporting and metrics, you also, if you wanted to make a change, let's say, oh, okay, well, I want to take Bob out of the receptionist queue and I want to rotate Alex in. To do those kinds of things, you had to call IT, right? Who wants to call IT to manage a telephone system? Nobody, right? They just want to, hey, put somebody, whoever's covering the phones, turn it on, hit a quick code and go do your work, right? And so they have added some quality of life things to Teams without any licensing on the phone side. But the Q's app is really their first attempt at adding historical reporting, real-time metrics, and more extensive management functions right in the Teams client itself. This was in talks for a while. It's a great start based on where the product is, and we're excited to see it grow and evolve. So this is one piece that's specific to the Teams phone offering, and it does require both the Teams phone and the Teams premium license to take advantage of. The Meet app. I mean, how many of you are actually in meetings all day long, like myself, and you would rely on those intelligent recaps or those files, and you really need an easy way to get to the recap or the transcript or the files that got added in the meeting. Some folks, this is practical, others it's not. And so this is a app on the sidebar of Teams for managing your meetings. What's coming up next? What did you do? And then some recent filters there at the bottom for you to easily move between meetings from the past or future, right? And so those are different pieces. They call this the Meet app. It is, again, exclusive to Teams Premium as well. So that's a few features in Teams Premium. Teams Premium has so many more, but we try to cherry pick out some of the ones that were really at the top of the list for us. Microsoft Copilot Teams features. We're not here today to talk about Microsoft Copilot in any real deep fashion. We're just kind of talking around Microsoft Copilot features in Teams. But I will say that the one feature that we're going to start with, or we did start with rather, which was the intelligent recap feature. That feature lives inside of both Copilot and Teams Premium. It is the one feature that lives on both sides. So if that's all you care about, you don't care about anything else, you can go ahead and just get the Teams Premium experience. Um, let's dive into some of the other pieces of where Copilot comes in as it relates to Teams. And so here you can see on the right sidebar, you have now an app you can interact with. And Copilot will give you, you walk into a meeting late, you can say, hey, recap the meeting. Tell me what happened. It'll give you the highlights of who spoke, what they said, what was discussed, those kinds of things. And then there's also some prompting in there that you can do along the way, hiding under one of those buttons. And you can ask specific questions as well. And so this is the catch-up feature. This feature, excuse me, extends not just in meetings, but it also can be engaged with at chats and channels. Any of the text experiences that you have there, you can say, give me the recap for the last day, and it will take a text blob. I don't know if anybody else constantly has chats in Teams that you're like, I don't have the time to read the 15 messages here. Well, it really helps you get to the relevant information faster. And so that's really great. That's the catch-up feature. We have the Copilot after meeting chat. And similarly, this is just the chat itself, right in line in your meeting experience. And so you can do the same kinds of things. You can go ahead and ask it, hey, what were the action items? Same kinds of things that you can do, but these are things that are extended after the meeting ends, right? What things left unanswered? What open questions do we have? And so that chat's there for you inside the meeting experience as well. Lastly, coming back around, and I apologize, I should have had this slide at the beginning of the Copilot section, but here you can now see the intelligent recap feature that I was referring to. And the only thing that's different is you have Copilot to talk to. And so if you don't want to talk to Copilot, no worries, just get Teams Premium and you can have all the rest in what you see there. But this is the one main difference as it relates to the intelligent recap with Copilot. So I couldn't have a Teams webinar and not talk about Teams for VDI or virtual desktop infrastructure. I don't think it's any secret, but desktops, VDI, desktop as a service, or DaaS as it's called, has played a big part in our industry, and it's grown even more since, pretty much since pre-COVID. That's when a lot of folks think people went home, but we were doing remote desktops for our customers on terminal servers when I started here, which was 5+ years before COVID even happened. And so VDI really comes with some different things to think about. I'm just going to set the stage for a second. When you're in a Teams meeting, you're going to have this camera right in front of you. You're going to have the microphone where you're speaking, right? And when you send those things from your computer to a virtual desktop, there's lots of things that can go wrong. By a show of hands or just emojis, has anyone had this delay experience where you've tried to actually take a meeting on a hosted desktop somewhere and it's just chaos, right? No matter how you do it. And so what we've learned, even though the technology's gotten better, is that the VDI solutions or virtual desktops really have some very, very unique needs. And so I just wanted to call out two really big things as it relates to VDI. The first is last year you heard us send out some messaging, or maybe you saw it on the internet, that Microsoft was retiring classic Teams in favor of new Teams specifically. And when that happened, Microsoft knew we can't shut down classic Teams for VDI yet because we haven't built all the features that people need in Teams for VDI, right? So they needed to extend the end of life for classic Teams until they could catch up and get those features the same. And so we're coming to a close of classic Teams for VDI. So if you're running Teams Classic and VDI in any way, reach out to whoever runs your VDI and make sure you're ahead of this. If you get to July 1 without a plan in place, you're probably going to be in a spot where you don't have teams functional. There's a couple other pieces that are just general things to know about. One of the big things that folks use is integration between Teams and Outlook, right? And so, how many people click on their calendar from Outlook and then they say launch a meeting or vice versa, right? Those kinds of things. Now, as with anything, you have integrations. Everyone here has used an add-on in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether it's in Outlook or any of your line of business apps, right? And so just know that in VDI, Teams and Outlook are pretty stable now with the new versions. For a while, some features kind of lagged behind, but they're caught up. Sometimes, just like Patch Tuesdays or when Microsoft would release a patch, Microsoft will release a patch that breaks the functionality of the integration between Teams and Outlook. And so that's why I say it's stable mostly. Sometimes if your updates get out of sync, or maybe Microsoft releases a bad update, all those things can happen. Just be aware of it. It is different than you have on your desktop computer. So get that granular specific update strategy. Make sure you understand that. The other thing that really mileage varies by is that audio video optimization or AVOP. And really, how this camera or this microphone gets carried through the remote session. There's different levels of support and certification even for those things. And so make sure you ask those questions. Am I certified with this VDI that I use for Teams, right? New Teams with VDI. The other thing to know, and this is in line with the whole classic thread that I had said earlier, most people said, well, hey, I'll just go ahead and take, if they're going to retire classic Teams, no worries. I'll just do Teams in the web. Well, guess what? New Teams for web isn't supported either. And so when July 1st comes, you're going to be in a really bad spot if you haven't tried to get ahead of that because the functionality is going to break or be really broken. It's just plainly stated not supported. We're going to provide a link to you guys in a follow-up email, and we'll have some specifics on this stuff because it's easy to get lost in. So we're going to go through and kind of wrap up here as we approach questions. Big picture, the new features never stop. I don't know if you need that reminder like I do sometimes that change never ends, but these things will be coming and coming and coming. Make sure you take an opportunity to talk to your folks inside your organization about how you approach them. And the more you can plan for how you adopt these features as an organization, the better off you'll be in streamlining your organization's communication, adoption, and efficiencies. Can't wait for everyone to get their hands on the new chat and channels experience. I hope the preview that you saw today, if you don't have it, that you're excited about it. And then as it relates to thinking about Teams Premium versus Copilot, if you're just not sure about Copilot, but you really value that intelligent meeting recap, the Teams Premium is a great place to start for that. And you could do that. It's $10 per user per month. As you mature in your organization, even with Microsoft's annual commits, you can pass that license on to another member of your team if you want Copilot. But Copilot doesn't make sense for everyone. And so you want to weigh that cost of value as you walk through it. So this is a call out to one of my faves. I am a huge Apple guy, and I cried when Steve Jobs died because I love that guy. He used to do this thing called One More Thing. I don't know if anyone ever saw him give a keynote, but he would say one more thing, and then he'd do this dramatic thing, and then boom, there it is. And this is me dropping it from the ceiling in Cupertino. SMS for Microsoft Teams in honor of Steve Jobs for folks that currently are on Teams Phone. If you use Teams Phone and pay for it, SMS is coming. We've all wanted it. We've wanted Microsoft to put it on their roadmap. That's a picture straight from it. And it will be rolling out February 2025, which is like 2 days. I can't wait to get my hands on it. The usage for SMS is included mostly in your calling plans that you already have. And I know you're going to have more questions around Teams Phone. And what I'm going to tell you is hold them and come back for our next Teams webinar. One other thing, this is a mantra of ours. We love these little pictures. We think about technology planning and making it successful. Every time I do a webinar, I try to throw these up for folks to see. These things are so important in terms of your plan for success. They're key, really simple principles. But if you adopt them, they will help you keep any technology, and they apply beyond technology as well. Moving along and keeping up with the change. A couple other things how we can help. Right, these are the things we do. Any of you that have seen us, heard us, maybe it's not not new news, but there's a reminder of some of the things we do. Azure Virtual Desktop is one of the newest things that we've been doing, and we're really excited about AVD and helping folks get to AVD for where they need it. In addition to that, we have some resource QR codes. I'll hang out here for just a second as we queue up. We are going to open Q&A in just a second, but there's two. The YouTube channel has all kinds of awesome resources across all of our teams. The Microsoft track, you'll see a lot of me there. Our agency consulting folks doing lots of great epic things. And then we talk about independent insurance agencies and the industry at large. And you'll see a lot of Jason and other members of our team, security and those things. And then all kinds of resources there as well. Look for those in the email, as well as some links that cover this stuff in more detail. Two webinars coming up. One I planted a few seeds on earlier, the Teams Phone. We have that scheduled out for March 20th. Jorge Vasquez, one of my partners in crime over here, who's been a huge Teams Phone advocate, has led a lot of our projects. He's going to be on the webinar. We hope you'll join us there. March 20th, and then the Epic Security Essentials, which is a cool mashup of Lauren and Jason. If you've seen or heard from them, we're excited to share that with you guys as well on February 20th.
Thanks, Adam, for giving us the updates. That's great.
You got it. Happy to do it.
Well, we got a couple questions, and I think you touched on pieces of these during the session. One of the questions, it looks like from maybe Madeline, was how do you update to the new version of Teams? And what does that process maybe look like?
Yeah, so specifically, we have two different things we were talking about today. One was the new chat and channels experience, and that is on a staged rollout. That's what I talked about at the beginning portion of this. About a year ago, Microsoft had all kinds of language around Teams Classic versus new Teams, and so you should already be on the new teams, right? And they reuse rather these words a lot, but new teams should already be available to you. All of these features that we demoed today are exclusive to new teams. You won't get them on it. If you look at the client itself in the web, it'll have a little V2 up there in the address bar. But everyone should be on new teams unless you're in VDI. We covered that a little bit. And then for these new chats and channels experience, it is just on a Microsoft rollout right now. And so they're going to start to do a little bit at a time like they do for all their stage rollouts. Eventually, they'll release controls for folks like us, IT, where we can turn it on. That's typically what they do. And then it will just be on by default or toggleable. But right now, it's still in a rollout. So it is a wait. You can engage us if we're a customer of yours or whoever helps you with IT, and we could probably take a closer look to see if it's shipped out.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, we got another question here, kind of related to the Teams Premium. This is from Mary. Good to see you out there, Mary. Will Teams Premium tell you who answers the call or the phone, I guess, as a part of that add-on and transfer? Or there's some additional metrics maybe that come out of Teams Premium? Do we know?
Yeah, so I don't I think what's being asked is will Teams Premium tell you who answered a call? I think is
Correct.
what
Yeah.
the functionality for how many calls someone answers, those kinds of things, how many calls got abandoned. Those are some of the core metrics that you'll see in the Q's app. Yes, and it is brand new, Mary. So it literally was starting development a year ago. They've released it now for general availability, and so they're adding more things. But yes, you can see those core metrics that you're looking for sure. The one thing that isn't there, and I don't want to mislead anybody, is a full-blown receptionist console. A lot of folks say, hey, I need a switchboard. You won't get that big of it yet today, but there are some cool third parties out there, but you can do a lot more with it on the call analytics and reporting side, as well as see some live calls.
That's great. We got a
Thanks for
question
the
here.
question.
Yeah, that's a great one. We got a question here about how long does chat history stay around, and can I keep people from deleting their chat history or modifying chats?
How long does chat history stay around, and can I change deleting it? That's a great question. So the Teams chat settings all live inside of the compliance area of the Teams, features. There are um, just generic Teams comes with a shorter retention, and if you pay for additional compliance controls, you can archive and store that chat information for much longer, right? And so you do have some controls. They're basic. They're not tied to the Teams premium so much as a premium compliance add-on.
Looks like we have a question from Jack. Is there a way to track PTO within Teams or some way to do that? Great
That's
question.
a great question, Jack. More or less, Teams has like thousands of add-ons, right? So I'm sure there's probably a third-party add-on out there for PTO tracking that you could add. They also have this thing called Shifts in there as an app, and it's really kind of centered around first-line workers. But just in terms of out-of-box Microsoft functionality, they're not keeping track of PTO in any canned way, if you will. I think if you wanted to do that, you would have to build some things. But I could see a combination of those things between Exchange and some other, custom built things. But no, not that I'm aware of. No PTO tracker baked in today.
Yeah, I've gotten that question from clients, so I'm curious to see what solutions are out there for sure. I was going to say, here's a question about I want to share chat with customers or vendors externally, like third party that are not in my organization. How do we do that? And what's the security look like when you do that?
So when it comes to secure chat in Teams, there's a few things to keep in mind. One is that you can lock chat down as much as you want. And so as an organizational security practice, I'll put my Adam security hat on and say, we recommend that you have a policy in place written and we follow it with technical controls to limit who and where your folks can chat with. You can lock it down to only within your organization. You can also add other partner organizations by domain that are a part of the Microsoft system. And you can also go and add specific ones along the way. And then you can toggle around external and guest, both. And so you have a lot of granularity. It does require, a policy and a procedure, and then IT, going through and managing that as well.
I think this one you probably had touched on in the earlier part about ABD, but we got a question, looks like from Joel, who asked, you mean the latest version of Teams isn't compatible. Has that been resolved yet? I think you had an
Yep.
answer there, but you want to just recap that again?
For sure, definitely. Hi, Joel. Glad you're here. Thanks for being here. So, specifically, as it relates to the new teams on VDI, one of the things specifically that was a holdout on the new Teams for VDI experience was the Outlook add-in on Teams in Outlook. And so that was broken for a while. I had mentioned earlier, Outlook add-on with the new Teams mostly works because really we've seen it break a few times, but it's mostly stable and it's at a place where it's ready to try again and do a rollout on for sure. And if it's not there by, July 1st, this is what'll happen. Microsoft will just push the rollout of Classic.
Awesome. I think we have about one more question or so here. Is it possible to migrate from Slack or another chat platform we're using today into Teams? And maybe what does that process look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a few years back, we've had questions about migrations from multiple different chat platforms. Really, as you might imagine, taking one kind of chat system and just carbon copying it over is a very, very involved thing, especially when the structures, channels, groupings, however you want to say, all of the different chat platforms work differently, right? Whether it's Slack, Teams, WebEx, there's a handful of them, but there is a possibility. There are migration tools out there. They're not first party. They do cost money from everything that I've seen. And there is some level of concession when you go through the migration process. Like, hey, we can export most of your data, but it's not going to fit into the same structure because of how Teams functions. And so you will see some differences there. What I would say is if you're looking to go through a change management process of moving over to Teams, you should draw a line in the sand and plan for how you will structure it in the Teams experience rather than saying, how did we do it in the Slack experience? That often works better. I've taken several folks through that migration and given them that advice, and they didn't take it. And they really just tried to apply the way that they worked in Slack directly to Teams, and they're different. So if you take a step back and say, hey, what's different? How can we change our workflows? How do we prepare our people for that? Definitely a doable thing. And with the migration tools that I've seen out there, the paid ones, they're pretty good in terms of what they can pull over. And so you can get a lot of that stuff out. But when you go between two systems that are not alike, you lose things. You got to make some habit changes, and sometimes you have to build a new, but it's not a total rebuild. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Adam. That pretty much caps most of the questions. Thank you so much for sending those in. If you guys have more questions, we'll still be available. There's a scheduling meeting link and some other ways you can reach us on the screen here. So take a look at that. Thanks again for joining us. If you want to learn more about some of the consulting services, there's a couple of methods where obviously you can schedule to reach with our team. And also, we're going to send out a post-webinar survey. If you stick around, that's really helpful for us in making sure we're doing content and things that you find value in, and make sure Adam has a new direction to go for the next topic in Microsoft land here. So thanks so much for sticking around, fill out that survey, and really appreciate the time here this afternoon.
Thanks for being here with us, guys. We'll see you again on the next one. Take care. Bye.